Everyone thought my job was easy until they gave it to 3 people. Now the company's falling apart, and I'm the only one who can fix it. But the real question is, do I even want to? People used to say I had a quiet presence in the office. I never really knew what they meant by that. Maybe it was because I wasn't loud in meetings or didn't care to take credit when things went right. I just kept my head down and made sure things worked. I started at the company 7 years ago as a junior systems analyst. Over time, I became the guy everyone turned to when something broke, or better yet, before it broke. I didn't have a fancy title, but I knew how every process fit together, every client's quirks, and every shortcut that saved hours. I'd solved problems quietly, stayed late when no one asked me to, and fixed things that weren't even technically my job. People would email me with subject lines like, "Help, Daniel, you're my only hope," or leave sticky notes on my monitor with smiley faces and coffee requests. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked being the one people could count on. I took pride in knowing I could hold the whole puzzle together, even if most people didn't see the full picture. But as the company grew, things started to shift. We hired new managers who didn't know what it was like when we were just a team of 12, grinding together in a single open office. These new folks walked around with buzzwords and big ideas. They liked clean charts and fast results, not slow consistency. I started noticing how rarely my name came up in meetings. My suggestions were brushed off for more scalable solutions, whatever that meant. I told myself it was fine. I wasn't in it for the applause. Still, something inside me started to ache. I watched people get promotions for half the work. I stayed quiet. When the company hit a record profit quarter, I got a thank you email with my name misspelled. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot for an extra 10 minutes, just staring at the dashboard. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe some kind of sign that someone somewhere had noticed. But no one came. And deep down, I started to wonder, what would happen if I just disappeared? A few weeks after that night in the parking lot, I started noticing things, little things at first. Meetings I used to be invited to suddenly became managers only. Projects I normally led were reassigned. My calendar, once crammed with overlapping requests, started to look empty. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe they were just restructuring. Maybe they wanted to streamline things. That was the word I kept hearing around the office lately, streamline. Then one afternoon, I walked past a conference room and heard my name. I stopped mid-step. The door was slightly ajar and I could hear voices, low, careful, clipped. "He's reliable, sure," someone said, "but is he really cost-effective?" Another voice chimed in. "Honestly, I think we could divide his responsibilities across a few new hires, bring in fresh energy, maybe even save on long-term costs." I stood there frozen, my body heavy like it had turned to stone. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. They weren't just talking about cutting hours or shifting roles. They were talking about replacing me. I quietly backed away before anyone saw me. My legs felt weak, like they couldn't carry the weight of what I'd just heard. I went to the break room and stood by the coffee machine, pretending to scroll through emails, but my hands were shaking. I thought about everything I'd done for the company. Late nights, skipped vacations, times I'd cleaned up others' messes without ever complaining. I thought about the time the server crashed on Christmas Eve and I drove 2 hours to fix it. I thought that meant something. Apparently, it didn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking, maybe they're right. Maybe I made myself too invisible. Maybe being dependable just made me disposable. But then another thought crept in, one I hadn't let myself consider before. If they really think 3 people can do what I do, they have no idea what I've been holding together. I didn't know what was coming next, but I had a feeling the cracks were already starting to show. It was a Thursday morning when I got the email. Subject line, "Quick HR touch base 11:00 a.m." Just seeing it made my stomach twist. I'd seen enough people walk into quick HR meetings and leave with cardboard boxes. But I still clung to a tiny shred of hope. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, a routine check-in. At 10:55, I forced myself to walk down the hall. Every step felt heavier than the last. The HR rep, Jenna, was already seated when I walked in. Next to her was Marcus, one of the newer directors who always smiled too much and listened too little. "Daniel," Jenna began, her voice flat but polite. "Thanks for coming. I'll get right to it." She always had a way of sounding like she was reading from a script, even in casual conversation. As you know, the company's been evaluating ways to increase efficiency and reduce redundancy. There it was again, efficiency, redundancy. I nodded slowly, even though my throat was dry. After reviewing your role and the broader organizational needs, we've decided to move in a different direction. Effective end of day tomorrow, your position will be phased out. I blinked just once, then again. Marcus jumped in. We're bringing in a small team to handle your responsibilities. With the company scaling, we felt this approach would allow for more flexibility and collaborative ownership of your workload. I wanted to laugh. Collaborative ownership. That was a fancy way of saying we think 3 people can do your job. I didn't say much. I think part of me had already seen it coming. I nodded. I signed where they told me. I even thanked them. Don't ask me why. They gave me 2 weeks severance and a branded pen. I left the meeting feeling hollow. I walked back to my desk like a ghost. Nobody looked up. Maybe they didn't know, maybe they didn't care. I packed slowly, taking only what mattered. My favorite mug, a notebook of scribbled ideas, a small photo of my niece. When I reached the elevator, I turned back once, just for a second. I had spent 7 years making sure everything ran smoothly. And now I was gone. Would anyone even notice? The first few days after I left were quiet. Too quiet. At first I tried to distract myself, cleaned out my apartment, started reading a book I hadn't touched in months, even tried a little cooking. But in the background, my mind kept drifting back to the office. To the familiar buzz of fluorescent lights, the rhythmic hum of keyboards, the casual, "Hey, Daniel, quick question," echoing from behind cubicles. I kept expecting my phone to light up with an urgent message. It didn't. Until it did. The first message came from Rachel, one of the account managers. "Hey, super random, but do you remember how to reset the client billing system password? It's been failing since you left." I answered her. I didn't want to, but I did. 2 days later, an old colleague called me in a panic. "Daniel, the reporting dashboard is down. The new guy said it was automated, but the scripts are crashing. We can't get the numbers to the clients." I told him where to look, how to fix it, then I hung up. And I realized something strange. The office was already unraveling. It turns out the 3 people they hired to replace me were struggling, badly. One of them didn't know how the internal tools worked. Another kept forwarding problems to someone else. The third, he quit after 4 days. Word started spreading quietly at first. A deadline missed here, a frustrated client there. Then entire systems started failing, not because they were complicated, but because no one else had ever needed to know how they worked, because I'd always taken care of them. And suddenly the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy with a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I didn't want them to fail, but I also couldn't pretend I wasn't watching from a distance, wondering how long it would take before someone at the top connected the dots. They thought they could replace me with 3 people. Now they couldn't even hold things together with 5. The irony didn't feel sweet, it felt lonely. I wasn't part of it anymore, but it was still falling apart without me. And whether they admitted it or not, they knew. By the end of the 2nd week, the ripple effects had turned into waves. I didn't even have to ask. People kept reaching out one by one like drops in a leaky faucet. Not just panicked questions anymore, but quiet admissions. Little truths they didn't feel safe saying inside the office. "Everything's chaotic without you," one message read. "It's like nobody knows who's doing what." Another said, "The new guys are already overwhelmed. One's been crying in the bathroom." I didn't reply to most of them, not because I was angry, but because I didn't know what to say. I had warned them in 100 silent ways before I left, had held everything together without ever making a scene. And now the seams were bursting. I heard from a friend in the IT department that one of the new hires accidentally deleted an entire month's worth of project backups. Another insider said a major client threatened to cancel their contract because deliverables were late, something that had never happened under my watch. And yet management acted like nothing was wrong. They held upbeat team meetings and pushed buzzword-heavy emails about transition resilience and adaptive workflows. It was laughable. Worse, morale was crumbling. People who had been confident and competent were now second-guessing everything. The structure we'd all leaned on was gone, and no one knew who to turn to. Except quietly, they kept turning to me. I was still jobless, still sitting in my apartment with no real plan. But I had something now that I didn't before. Perspective. From a distance, I could finally see just how much I'd held up. Not just systems or tasks, but people. I'd been the quiet anchor, the silent problem solver, and without that, the whole place was drifting. I wasn't smug about it. In fact, it stung. Because as much as I tried to detach, I still cared. Not about the company, not anymore, but about the people. The ones I used to eat lunch with, the ones who trusted me, the ones now stuck cleaning up a mess I didn't make. The ones who, slowly but surely, were starting to say the words I had waited 7 years to hear. We didn't know how much we needed you until you were gone. For the first time in years, my alarm didn't control me. I woke up when I wanted, took slow walks around the neighborhood, drank coffee without rushing through it. For a while, I didn't know what to do with the silence. No emails, no phone buzzes, no pressure. At first, it felt like I was drifting, like I'd lost my purpose. I kept thinking, if I wasn't the guy who held everything together, who was I? The first few days, I just let myself feel it, everything I'd been pushing down. The betrayal, the confusion, the exhaustion I hadn't realized I was carrying. It hit me all at once, like a delayed crash after running on autopilot for too long. One night, I found an old sketchbook buried in the back of my closet. I used to draw all the time before the job consumed my life. Just rough pencil sketches, people on trains, buildings, trees, nothing fancy. But something about holding that pencil again felt honest, like I was reconnecting with someone I'd lost. I started going to a nearby cafe with my sketchbook, just sitting by the window, watching the world move at its own pace. I wasn't solving problems. I wasn't fixing disasters. I was just being. It was strange and it was peaceful. Over time, I started picking up freelance projects here and there, small things. Helping a friend's business organize their back-end systems, coaching a college student through a programming assignment. No pressure, just doing what I was good at on my own terms. I was still getting messages from my old coworkers, still hearing how things were falling apart. But for once, it wasn't my mess to clean up, and that realization that I didn't owe them anything was freeing. For so long, my identity had been tied to that job, that desk, that office. But now, slowly, I was learning that I was more than the role they fired. I was someone who could rebuild not for them, but for myself. And maybe, just maybe, that version of me was stronger than the one they let go. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the call came. I almost didn't answer. The number was familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second longer than usual. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Daniel," came the voice, tight and anxious. "It's Marcus." I sat up straighter. Marcus, the same director who'd sat beside HR while they fired me like it was nothing. "I know this is unexpected," he continued, "but we could really use your help." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch, let him feel it. He cleared his throat. "The team we brought in, it didn't work out. We've had some major client fallout, deadlines missed, systems down. Honestly, it's a mess." A flicker of something stirred in me, part vindication, part sadness. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "We need someone to come in and get things back on track. No one knows the systems like you do." And he paused. "We're prepared to discuss a consulting fee, a generous one." I could hear the desperation in his voice now. He wasn't calling because he respected me. He was calling because they were drowning. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to say no, to remind him how replaceable I was supposed to be, to ask him how those fresh hires were working out now. But another part of me wasn't angry anymore. I'd moved on. I'd started finding pieces of myself again. And maybe this was a chance, not to go back, but to finish what I started on my own terms. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Email me the details." He sighed in relief, like I'd just thrown him a life raft. After we hung up, I stared out the window for a long time, rain tapping softly against the glass. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me choosing if and how I wanted to return. They needed me now, that much was clear. But what they didn't realize yet was this: I wasn't the same person they let go. I didn't rush my decision. Marcus followed up the next morning with an email titled "Urgent Consulting Proposal." It was stuffed with numbers, vague apologies, and a formal request for me to return as a special advisor. The pay was generous, much more than they ever gave me when I was holding everything together for free. But I didn't respond right away. I spent 2 more days thinking it through. This wasn't about revenge. I wasn't looking to prove anything anymore. I just wanted to make sure I did this for the right reasons and on my terms. When I finally replied, I kept it short. I'll come in for 2 weeks. I work remotely. I don't attend team meetings. I fix what needs fixing, nothing more. After that, we part ways, deal. They agreed within the hour. On Monday, I logged into their system. It was worse than I expected. Files were misnamed. Automation scripts were broken or missing. Whole client processes had been rerouted in the most inefficient ways imaginable. It was like someone had taken a hammer to a machine I'd spent years fine-tuning. But strangely, I didn't feel angry. I felt calm, clear. This time, I wasn't just patching holes. I was rebuilding boundaries. I didn't answer every message. I didn't stay up all night fixing other people's mistakes. I gave them exactly what they paid me for, no more, no less. And you know what happened. People started treating me differently. They listened when I spoke. They didn't interrupt. They didn't question my process. Some even apologized, quietly, awkwardly, like they weren't sure how to say what they should have said years ago. By the end of the second week, the systems were stable. Clients were calmer. The fire was contained. Marcus called me again on Friday. "Daniel, we'd love to bring you back full-time. New title, your own team, whatever you want." I smiled. "Thanks," I said, "but I'm not coming back." I meant it. Not because I was bitter, but because I'd finally seen my own worth. And I wasn't going to trade that piece for a desk I'd already outgrown. When I hung up that call with Marcus, I expected to feel triumphant. I didn't. What I felt was something deeper, quieter. Closure. For so long, I had attached my value to that job. I thought the long hours, the silent sacrifices, the way I quietly kept everything running, that was what made me matter. But stepping away had shown me the truth. I mattered whether they saw it or not. Turning down that offer should have felt risky. Walking away from a higher salary, from a title, from recognition I'd once begged for in silence. A year ago, I wouldn't have believed I could do it. But now, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I had a growing list of freelance clients who respected my time. I had control over my schedule. I had sleep. I had mornings that didn't start with anxiety and nights that didn't end with burnout. I also had clarity. Marcus sent a follow-up email a few days later. It was longer, more formal. He tried again, more money, more perks, even equity. I stared at it for a while before replying. "I appreciate the offer, but I've moved on to something that fits me better. I hope you find what you're looking for." No malice, no bitterness. Just the truth. Some part of me had always wanted that dramatic full-circle moment, where I'd return a hero, and everyone who doubted me would have to swallow their pride. But when the moment came, I didn't need it. Because I'd already won. Not in front of them, but in front of myself. I had finally learned the lesson I was never supposed to learn inside those office walls. Your worth isn't measured by how quietly you hold everything together. It's measured by how boldly you walk away when you finally realize you deserve better. It's strange how life looks different when you're no longer trying to prove yourself to people who never saw you. A few months have passed now. Sometimes I'll walk past the old office building on my way to meet a client or grab coffee. It still looks the same from the outside, same glass walls, same buzzing lights inside. But I don't feel that old pull anymore. No sting of nostalgia. No need to look up and wonder what if. Because I know now I never belonged there in the first place. Not really. They replaced me with 3 people, then 5, then contractors. Some stayed, some didn't. But none of them could do what I did, not because I was superhuman, but because I had built something quietly, piece by piece, with care and understanding no job description could capture. It wasn't just code or process flows. It was trust, stability, quiet leadership. The kind you don't notice until it's gone. And when it was gone, everything cracked. People still reach out sometimes. Former coworkers now job hunting. Clients I once supported looking for someone reliable. They tell me the same thing over and over again. We didn't know how much you were holding up. But now I don't need them to say it. I don't need the applause. I don't need the offer. Because the person I am today, he's not waiting for permission to be seen. I've built something new, on my terms, slowly, steadily. I've found peace in the boundaries I never dared set back then. I've found pride in work I don't have to burn myself out for. I've found worth in myself, not in their title, their praise, or their broken promises. They thought I was just a role, just a replaceable part in a machine. But I was more. And now they know. Because while they scramble to fill the gap I left behind, I walk forward every day with the quiet, steady confidence of a man who knows the truth. I was never just an employee. I was the man they couldn't replace.